Hi guys, to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. Today we're making a chocolate Yule log. This is a festive dessert that's perfect for your holiday table or for a special occasion. We're going to make a chocolate sponge cake and then we're going to fill it with a coffee mascarpone buttercream because chocolate and coffee go so well together. But first we're going to begin by making the syrup, and we're making a coffee syrup today just so that way we can soak up that sponge cake, because sponge cake does tend to be a little bit on the drier side. So in a small saucepan, we're going to combine 1 cup of water with 1 cup of sugar and 2 teaspoons of instant coffee. We're going to mix that all up and bring it to a boil. Once it boils and the sugar is dissolved, we're going to take it off of the heat and whisk in a teaspoon of pure vanilla extract, and then we're going to set that aside to cool completely. All right, so the next step is to make the sponge cake, the chocolate sponge cake. In a mixer that I have fitted with the whisk attachment, I have 3/4 cup of granulated sugar, and to it I'm going to add 5 whole eggs that are at room temperature. You want to make sure that the eggs are at room temperature so that way they whip up easily. If they're cold, it's going to take much longer. So if you didn't take them out ahead of time, like an hour before you were going to make the cake, you can take the eggs and put them in a big bowl of warm water and just change out that water a few times, and then the eggs will be at room temperature in a few minutes. And I'm going to whip them at high speed for about 5 minutes or until they're really nice and thick and fluffy. So next, in this bowl, I have some cocoa powder. This is unsweetened cocoa powder, 1/3 cup or 30 grams. I have 3/4 cup or 112 grams of all-purpose flour, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and a teaspoon of, what is it called, baking powder. And I'm just going to whisk everything all together. These are the dry ingredients. And over here, I've melted 4 tablespoons or 2 ounces of unsalted butter. And I'm going to add that to the egg mixture. You can use vegetable oil instead. And now, anytime you're making chocolate cake, if you add the tiniest bit of coffee, it just makes it more chocolatey tasting, and you're not going to taste the coffee actually. So you're going to combine a teaspoon of pure vanilla extract with a teaspoon of instant coffee and just whisk it together. And add that to the egg mixture. And then we're just going to add the dry ingredients in 2 or 3 batches until they're just combined. And then with a spatula, just go ahead and give it a nice light whisking so that way everything is well combined and whatever is possibly stuck to the sides and bottom of the bowl incorporates evenly, and you're going to have a nice even chocolate batter. It's ready. You just don't want to overmix. Okay, that's done. I have a baking tray here that's lined with parchment paper. I'm going to save that piece of parchment for rolling up the cake in a minute. And I have just plain baking spray. You can brush it with butter if you want. This just is much easier. Just spray the parchment like that. And we're going to spread the batter into the pan. You don't have to go all the way out to the very edges. Just get a nice even layer. So go ahead and spread it. You don't have to spread it out to the edges. Just get it nice and even. And then just make sure that your oven is preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. This is going to bake on the center rack for about 10 to 12 minutes. Once it's nice and springy and a toothpick that's inserted in the center comes out clean, it's good to go. Take it out, and then you're going to want to roll it up right away, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. I'm going to bake this, clean up a little bit, and then we'll move on to the next step. As soon as the cake is ready, go ahead and run a knife all around the sides so that way it releases from the pan, and then dust it with some powdered sugar. Put another piece of parchment on top and another pan so that way it flips over easily. And while the cake is still warm, we're going to roll it up so that way it retains its shape later on when we go to roll it back up after it's iced. Carefully peel off the parchment. Dust it with some more confectioner sugar, also known as powdered sugar. and then start rolling it up. Now you can use the same piece of parchment paper that you have underneath. That's what I prefer to use. Or you could line it with a kitchen towel, but I feel like this is so easy. I'm also going to use this kitchen towel to keep it nice and moist, because sponge cake does have a tendency to dry out. I'm going to set it aside and let it cool completely. It's going to take about 15 minutes or so, maybe 20 minutes. Okay, so while the cake is cooling, I have 8 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate. Get the best chocolate that you can find. This is baking chocolate. Guittard is something that's commonly found in the regular supermarkets, but if you can get a nice Belgian chocolate like Calibao, that is just fabulous. But this will definitely work. And then I have a cup of heavy whipping cream that I've heated up. It's scalding hot. You just want to pour it over the chocolate and add a teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. And let the chocolate sit in there and soften for a little bit. And then we're just going to whisk it up until it's nice and smooth and shiny chocolate ganache. See how shiny that is? That step is done. We're going to set that aside, and now we're going to make the frosting. All right, so for the frosting, we're making it with mascarpone cheese just because it makes it so easy and it's nice and smooth. It's also very mild and delicious. You can usually find this in the supermarket where the specialty cheeses are. Some supermarkets carry it just all year round. If you have a difficult time finding it, you can substitute it for some cream cheese. The cream cheese does have a little more tang, but it is going to give you the smoothness that mascarpone has, so there's an option for you. In the mixer, you want to add 1.5 cups of heavy whipping cream, and you want it to be really nice and cold. I'm just going to go ahead and add 2 cups. Because who doesn't want more frosting, right? And then I'm going to add 1.5 cups of powdered sugar, but since I put 2 cups of whipped cream in there, I'm going to add 2 cups of powdered sugar. That's usually not the measurement for whipped cream, but we're not making whipped cream. We're adding mascarpone cheese to this too, and we want it to be nice and sweet. The coffee is going to cut a little bit of that sweetness, so keep that in mind. And I'm going to mix the coffee with the vanilla extract just like I did before. 2 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract and 2 teaspoons of instant coffee. This is just going to melt together. I'm just going to add that to the mixture. And I'm going to whip this until it begins to thicken. We're not looking for stiff peaks because we're going to add more cream to it and continue to mix it. We just want it to get nice and fluffy. That is what nice and fluffy looks like. Actually, I'm going to fluff it up just a little bit more. That looks really good. And over here, I have the 8 ounces of mascarpone cheese. It's 226 grams, straight out of the refrigerator. You want it to be nice and cold. And I'm going to drop it in there and whisk it all together. Here's an option for you if you don't like coffee flavored buttercreams. You can leave the coffee out completely of the ingredient list and just add the 2 teaspoons of vanilla, mix everything all together, and then you could stream in some of the cooled ganache to get a chocolate flavored frosting. So if you like chocolate instead, or you can keep it plain vanilla. We give you options here. Or you can add a little bit of your favorite jam in there to give it a little bit of a fruity flavor. Let's see if the sugar and everything is right. Oh my goodness, that is so good. The frosting is ready. Now we're going to assemble the cake. All right, so now it's time to assemble the cake. But before we do, I just want to go over a few experiences that I had while I was testing this cake recipe last weekend. I took all weekend to test it. I made a few different sponge cakes and tried different methods. I also did a little bit of research online and found a lot of lies out there, you guys, a whole lot of lies. So some very famous blogs claim that you can take the sponge cake and make it ahead of time, and just as it is right here, without it being filled, you can just take this, wrap it up in plastic, and freeze it for like a week or 2 ahead of time. My intuition told me that that can't be, because I ran a bakery for 10 years and we would have never done that, because I know that once you go to unroll a frozen and thawed out sponge cake, it's going to crack into a million pieces and it's just going to be a disaster, but I thought maybe they knew something that I don't. So I gave it a try and I made an extra sponge cake. I decorated one the same day like I normally do, and then I refrigerated one. I didn't even freeze it. And I used it straight away the next day, and would you know it, the whole thing broke. It broke into like 3 or 4 pieces. It was a big mess. I was able to fix it just because I have 10 years of cake decorating experience, probably more. But I don't want you doing that. So do not listen to some of these blogs out there. I don't know what they're using, but it's not going to hold up in the freezer. Once you ice it, then yes, you can freeze it, and actually it'll stay fresh in the freezer for like a month because it's already iced and everything, and you won't be unrolling it. That's it. That's all I need to tell you right now. We're gonna unroll this, fill it, and roll it back up. But just keep in mind that although a lot of steps can be done ahead of time, and I do tell you which ones can be done ahead of time, this one cannot. You're gonna have to make this the day that you're going to be frosting it. But you can definitely make it 2 weeks ahead of your party and just frost it and keep it in your freezer. So there you go. All right, so carefully unroll it. And it is gonna have a few cracks in there. Don't worry about the few that are gonna be in there. Now, sponge cake tends to be super dry, so I wouldn't skip the syrup part. You're gonna want to soak this with as much syrup as you can. This is what's gonna give it that moisture and keep it nice and soft. And again, if you're not a fan of coffee syrup, you can just swipe out the coffee, just leave it out completely, and just add the vanilla extract and make it a vanilla syrup. You want to focus especially on those edges. They tend to be extra dry. So now I'm going to do a light coating of this ganache. Go ahead and spread it. It's going to pretty much absorb into that cake, but it is going to give it a nice fudginess, a fudgy texture. Tiny bit more. And then a nice layer of the mascarpone filling. You don't want to put more than half in here. First of all, it's all going to ooze out. And second, you're going to need it for the top. We're going to frost the cake with the same icing. So get a nice smooth layer, and don't go all the way up to the edges because like I said, once we roll up, it is going to start to ooze out of the cake, which is fine. You can clean it up once you're done. So if you want to get a little more fancy, you can chop up some chocolate and just put it on top of the filling, the mascarpone frosting. Now we're just going to roll this back up. And if it's sticky the way mine is from the steam, from the heat, just use the spatula to roll it and the paper. And before I get to the edge, I'm going to get another piece of parchment so that way once I'm done rolling it, I put it on there. It's going to be much easier to transfer this onto a serving platter afterwards. So now we have it all rolled up. We're going to brush the top with some more syrup. And you are going to notice that there are going to be lots of cracks. This is a very moist cake because we have really soaked it well. It also retain some moisture when you roll it up, and all that steam that's trapped inside is going to soften it up a little bit more. But you do want some of the syrup on there because this syrup has flavor. Okay, and at this point you want to put it in the refrigerator or in the freezer for about an hour so it can set before we decorate the top. You can transfer the frosting in the meantime in a little container and keep it refrigerated so it's nice and cool and it doesn't start to melt or deflate. I'm going to put this in the freezer, clean up a bit, and then we're going to move on to the next step. All right, so the cake is nice and chilled, so it's ready to ice. But before we do that, we're just going to cut off the ends, the two ends, so that way we can have nice and neat edges. See? And then I'm going to cut about 3 inches of one side off, but I'm going to do it at a diagonal, just like that. And I'm going to set this piece aside because I'm going to use it in a second. Okay, so this is going to be my serving platter. I'm going to carefully get this cake onto the serving platter. And that's why we had the parchment paper underneath it. So that way this step is very easy. And this is why you want to make sure that you chill it. You don't skip that step. Now I'm going to take a little bit of this coffee icing and I'm going to put it on one side of the cake so that way we can glue it to the side so it can just look like a piece of log that's just broken. And now if you want to, you can take all of this frosting and you can put it in a pastry bag that's fitted with a star attachment and just pipe it all around the cake. If you like to do that, you can go ahead and do that. Or you can just use a small or a large offset spatula and get all of the icing on the cake like I'm doing right here. And then we're just gonna run a fork over it to just kind of make a nice ridge decoration so it can look like a log. And then you just want to take a fork and just roll it down the icing. Now, you can leave it just like that, and it does need to go back in the freezer or in the refrigerator. So I would put it in the freezer for about an hour just so it could set really nicely. And then once it comes out, you can just melt this ganache a little bit more in the microwave just until it's a little bit runny, maybe about for 15 seconds. If you don't use the microwave, you could put it over a bain-marie so that we can melt just a little bit and you can just drizzle it on top. It's up to you what kind of look you're going for. If you have any candied rosemary or candied cranberries, that would make really nice decorations, or you can just put some fruit on top. It's totally up to you. I'm gonna pop this back in my freezer so it can set a little bit. All right, so the cake is ready. I did chill it, like I said, for about an hour, and then I warmed up the ganache a little bit in the microwave for about 11 seconds. Mix it all up so that way it can drizzle on top very smoothly and easily. But you can leave it without the ganache. It just depends what look you're going for. The combination of the ganache and the coffee mascarpone cream is delicious. So if you want to drizzle it, go ahead and drizzle it on top, and then you can go ahead and serve it. When you slice into it, you'll see just how soft and creamy the cake is on the inside. Layla's here to help us with the taste test. You want to go first?
You.
Me?
Yeah.
No, you go first.
No, you.
Okay, I'll go first. You don't have to tell me twice. Your turn.
Yummy.
Good? Yummy? The chocolate cake is chocolatey. You can't taste the coffee in the chocolate cake, even though it was drenched in that coffee syrup, but that coffee buttercream is so light and creamy, and that coffee, the amount of coffee flavoring is just perfect. The chocolate ganache gives it a little bit of a fudgy consistency. The cake, again, is so moist. I've had some super dry sponge cakes, you guys, and this is not it. If you follow the steps, you'll have a successful Yule log on your holiday table. So easy to make, just like I did. You can make the whole thing and assemble it without icing the top, or you could even ice the top actually, and keep it wrapped in plastic, frozen for about a week. If you're gonna just fill the roll up with the frosting and the ganache in the center and just roll it back up, you can wrap it up in plastic and keep it in the freezer up to a month. It'll taste just like it was freshly made. And then the day that you're gonna be serving it, or the day before, you could frost the top, put the whole thing together, and it's just gonna taste like you freshly made it. We've had a bakery and we did things like this just to make life easier, and it's fresh and delicious each and every time. I hope you guys give this recipe a try. The exact measurements are on the website, dimitrasdishes.com. Thank you guys so much for spending time with me today. I'll see you all next time. Yes, us.
Bye.